everyone, it's Jessica with Pretty Presets, and I wanted to do a video that showed how I edited this picture that I posted earlier today in the group. This was from a session I did this morning, and this sweet little baby girl was super tired and just was not in the mood for smiling. So Dad was going in and tickling her in between me taking pictures of her, and this was just one shot that I really wanted to save. I really love her sweet smile in it and just her eyes and her toes, and so I knew that in Lightroom I could actually remove his arm. A lot of people think that this is a job for Photoshop, but Lightroom is actually really good at removing things like this, and it's not as hard as you would think. And so I just wanted to do a video that showed how I did it. I selected Peacock as my preset, and it is from the treasure chest that was given when you signed up for the forum. With this preset, with this particular image, it's a little bit too warm, so the first thing I want to do is I want to cool it off a little bit just by reducing the slider over here. I already like that a lot better. The next thing I want to do is the preset also applied a lot of exposure. Well, not a lot, but just enough that I didn't need that much exposure. I'm going to bring that down a little bit. Another thing that I noticed is a lot of areas are kind of blown out. You can't really see a lot of the detail in this quilt, and so for that I'm just going to reduce my highlights. I'm going to bring it down to about there, and already you can see the detail in her quilt come back, and even in her face it's a little bit better. Another thing that I do, and just my typical workflow, is I will reduce the clarity to about -10. It's kind of my sweet spot. It's kind of where I like my images. It just kind of makes everything a little bit softer. And so those were just my basic edits. Right now, just for the sake of time, I will just go straight into how I cloned, or actually I used the heal tool to remove Dad's arm here. And so I'm going to click on the spot removal tool. And again, for this, I actually used more healing than cloning. I think there was a few spots that I used cloning, but for majority of this edit, I actually used the heal tool. And if I can get away with using the heal tool, I will. I think it's a little bit more forgiving, a little bit easier to work with sometimes than the cloning tool. The cloning tool is definitely necessary for some jobs, and so, but for this one, like I said, I was able to get away with just by using the heal tool. And so I'm going to have my feathering, let's see, around there. I have my opacity at 100, and so I'm just going to make my brush size big enough to kind of cover his arm, and I'm going to do this in stages, just in pieces. I'll do the first chunk kind of big. So I'm just going to pull down and drag the area that I want to remove, and so Lightroom is going to automatically choose a sample area to pull from. This is obviously not the area that I want to pull from, and so I'm just going to move this over here. This is a really nice clean slate that I have to work with, that I can use this to kind of paint images over here. And so I am just going to play with this and tweak it. Something that you should know when playing around with these, and again, this just takes a lot of practice before you kind of get the hang of it, but these things will, they work in opposition. So as you pull this one up, this is going to go down, and so that's just something just to keep in mind as you're moving. I have a touch of dyslexia, so that took me a little while to figure out, and even now sometimes I get confused. So I'm just going to keep pulling this up until this is flush with this, and we're already pretty close. I'm just going to pull it up just a tad more. And see what that looks like over here. And so I think that's going to be pretty good. Okay, I really like that. I'm going to play with my feathering a little bit, just seeing if I can get rid of a little bit more of his arm. As you reduce your feathering, the lines are going to get a little bit stronger, a little bit harsher. As you increase your feathering, it's going to get a little bit softer. And so that didn't really make a difference. Oh, actually it did. My Lightroom is moving slow. So just by pulling down my feathering, I don't know if you noticed that, it erased much more of his arm, and it still looks clean enough that I think that will work really good. So just in one click, we've already erased the top part of his arm, and so that was super fast. So I'm going to go in and continue doing this. For a lot of these, what you'll run into, and I did a video on this the other day, is you'll run into getting so many of these spots that you won't be able to get underneath them to start to pull from. So let's say I wanted to start my next healing area right here. Well, it's not letting me even select it because there's already a healing circle there. And so the trick that I use to get around that is you just press the H on your keyboard, and that's going to hide these circles. They're still working, they're still doing their job, but now you're free to continue using the spot removal tool wherever you want. And so I'm just going to make this maybe a little bit smaller. I'm going to come in and try to pull a little bit down further. Go to about right there. I'm going to press my H button on my keyboard again to bring back these circles. Again, Lightroom has selected her sweet face to pull from, and that's not the area I want to work from, so I'm going to move over to this area. I'm going to try softening my feathering a little bit more now that we're down in this area. Maybe not quite that much. And my Lightroom's moving a little slow today, so I think I'm gonna like that. Let's see once it uploads what that looks like. I think that looks really good. And so now we've just done two. Actually, I'm probably gonna reduce the feathering just a little bit more. So just that reducing of that feathering, did you see that it got rid of more of his arm right there? Just a little bit of that. And so I like that. Looks really good. I'm going to press my H button to hide those circles again, and I'm just going to go through and continue working on this. This is going to get a little bit more challenging as we get closer to her sweater. I'm going to press my H button to pull up the circles. I'm going to drag this over here. Kind of adjust my feathering, see what we can do to make this look as natural as possible and to cover as much as possible. I think that works good. I'm going to press my H key again. And now for this, I'm going to go straight up. Press my H key again. It's pulling from her sweet face again. It really likes her face. I don't blame it. It's really cute. Okay, so we're going to pull from here. So now what you're going to run into, and this might be where I jump over to using the cloning tool. Cloning is going to pull a carbon copy of your sample area over here. Healing is going to blend the area you're trying to remove with your sample area. So you can see I have a little bit of this circle maybe touching her sweater. So Lightroom is mixing the color pixels of this area with this area. So you're seeing a blending of this sweater, and we definitely don't want that to happen. Let's click over. This is still selected. Let's click over to clone and see just what that looks like. Okay, so clone, again, is just taking a carbon copy of the pixels over here. And you can, again, adjust the feathering of the clone just to try to soften it up a little bit and see what that looks like. A lot of times people complain with cloning is that it's a little bit too harsh, but I think that we can kind of get away with that. And so we'll leave that. Let's go ahead and press H and erase those circles. And let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit here so we can get closer. I'm going to make my brush size smaller. And we're on clone now because we're getting so close to her sweater. And because we're cloning, we actually can probably, let me think about this. Probably pull from an area. I'm going to press H again to bring back. We can probably pull from an area that includes her sweater. I don't know if that makes sense. And again, this just takes playing with it and practice. And sometimes you try. So I just tried something. It's obviously not going to work. So I'm just going to right click and I'm going to delete that. A lot of times this is just trial and error. I'm going to press the H key to get rid of that again. And let's just go through, try to get as close to her sweater as possible. Press the H key again for that to be brought back. Okay, so now let's try softening this feathering and see if we can get a little bit more natural. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Okay, and again, we can do some other things with brushes to soften this area because right now it's obviously still a little bit noticeable. And so let's just kind of continue working with this. I am still on clone as opposed to heal, and again, I'm using clone now because I'm working closely with her sweater. I'm just going to do one quick little circle right here. I'm just going to click it. I'm going to press the H button to see where it's pulling from. And I'm going to adjust this. Went the wrong way there. Pull down a little bit. Maybe increase my feathering some just to soften that line. Okay, and I think that that'll work. And again, for the sake of this video, I'm going to try not to be too nitpicky with this. I'm going to end with just doing this little spot down here. I'm pressing the H key in between these so I can be hiding these circles and pulling them back up. I'm going to make this a little bit stronger, just again to get rid of kind of this area right here. Hide that. Maybe do one more right here. Again, just doing a circle. I'm going to press the H key again. It's pulling from over there. I definitely don't want to pull from the quilt. See what that looks like. I'm going to soften that a little bit more. If you can see the circle, that's where you need to probably adjust your feathering. Okay, let's see. Let's zoom out and see what that looks like. Okay, so that's pretty decent right now with no brushes whatsoever. And that is just a drastic difference in terms of erasing his arm. And so the trick that I mentioned in my editing earlier was that I will go into my brushes now, and something that I use quite a bit when I've cloned out something is the skin smoothing brush. And so I'm just going to take this brush, I'm just going to kind of blend this area right here. There's lots of different tricks you can do. Burning, which will darken the area, or lightening the area again, just to kind of blend out any of these issues that would hide that you cloned out somebody's arm. You don't even really need to use this up here, but sometimes I will, again, just over wherever I cloned out, just to kind of hide any blemishes. Something else that I did in my edit earlier that I mentioned is I added a brush with Add Clarity, and I just added that right along her arm. Again, just to kind of sharpen up her arm right there where it might be kind of fuzzy from our editing. And so there you have it. It's not the most perfect thing in the world, but again, if I hadn't told you that, or if you had just watched me clone out his arm, you probably would never look at any imperfections that you would see pretty close up. And again, I can go back through and kind of make adjustments and be really nitpicky about it, but that's just a really quick and simple way that you can use Lightroom to do a lot of the things that you would think Photoshop is needed. So anyways, I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks so much. Have a good night.